So Norway removed, the first thing that happened in Norway was that trans activists lobbied for the removal of transvestic fetishism to belong in the diagnosis criteria, the diagnostic classification of a fetish. So that was the first thing that happened. That happened in 2009, and all of a sudden, transvestic fetishism wasn't a fetish anymore. And that brought on a wave of men claiming to be women. And it also brought with it this new vocabulary of trans persons, and then this concept, gendered identity. It started flooding the mainstream media, and then it started flooding like legislation and politicians. And then once that was done, in 2013, the concept of gender identity was then included in Norwegian discrimination law. And then the discrimination law then went from being protecting like specific characteristics, and it became this kind of catch-all thing where women's rights and sex-based discrimination law was sort of lumped together with all the other characteristics, race, sexual orientation, and then this new gendered identity. And this decision was made without any assessments to how it would impact women and girls. The next step that happened was that in 2015, the Norwegian Tax Department cited the supposed rights and needs of, and I quote here, transvestites, in their decision to remove biological sex as an identity marker. This decision was also made without any assessments to how the removal of biological sex as an identity marker would affect women, even though it is women who almost exclusively is affected by such a decision. But the needs of transvestites, which is of course still a term referring to men with a fetish, regardless of the diagnostic classification, their rights, their needs were assessed in several paragraphs. And now it's decided that Norway will introduce gender-neutral identification numbers by 2032, where biological sex will be completely removed as an identity marker. And this is all in line with the Yoga Carta principles, which very clearly states that this is the goal. Then in 2016, Norway implemented a law that made it technically impossible to differentiate between biological sex and the concept of gendered identity. The purpose of the law was to remove the criteria of having a diagnosis in order to change legal sex. The campaign was waged using the techniques described in the now notorious Denton's manual, by attaching the proposal to a more popular reform to give it a protective veil, avoiding media attention, and by targeting youth politicians in order to have them present the necessary arguments to the different political parties. And I'm quoting here because this is what it says in that manual. By having the youth political parties present the necessary changes to the political parties, it would give the impression that the proposal came from within the party rather from an external political lobby organization. And of course, they also lied, straight up lied. They spun this narrative that it was a condition on changing legal sex that the person applying for the legal change had undergone chemical, had undergone so-called sex reassignment. But this was never the case. So they outright lied and said that the current legal legislations required the sterilization of trans persons in order for them to be recognized for who they really are. Which was not true because there was, so-called sex reassignment was never a condition in order to change legal sex in Norway. The only condition there was to have a medical diagnosis. So by now, in 2013, within then 7 years, they had removed fetishism, transvestic fetishism as a fetishistic diagnosis, a diagnosis of fetishism. And then they now removed the criteria to have a medical diagnosis in order to change or to apply to change legal sex. So the campaign succeeded above all expectations. In Norway, anyone now can change their legal sex regardless of age, actually. But from the age of 6 years and older, you don't need a medical diagnosis. And the children between the ages of 6 and 16 can change their legal sex with only one consenting parent. But they can also change the legal sex without any parental consent. By going, they've opened up a loophole for children essentially to do that without parental consent.